Okay, you guys, time for a Diddy update on gag orders, mistrials, and leaks, right? So apparently, in this ongoing case involving Sean Diddy Combs, the rap mogul, in the Southern District of New York, where the case is basically being held, the court addressed two key motions, I believe, that could impact the proceedings. The main one was the motion for a gag order. And I just saw in the New York Post, on page 6, that the judge has sort of done a two-way whammy. First, she rejected she, I'm not sure whether the judge is male or female. Oops. Do excuse me for that. But the judge basically rejected the proposals as it was worded and proposed by defense counsel for a gag order prohibiting the prosecutor's prosecution, as you want, from disclosing information about the case to the press and to the public, because obviously it's highly prejudicial to the defendant and would prevent him from having a fair trial. So the judge, according to the New York Post, rejected that, but the judge at the same time did not reject it because the judge cautioned everyone, both the defense and the prosecution, against disclosing confidential, sealed information to the public on the threat of repercussions, appropriate consequences that the court will then unleash. So, in fact, it was a bit of a win for the defense in that sense, in that she didn't officially say this is a gag order, but in fact, she said, you are gagged, right? Um, what was interesting about it, and what I think a couple of my favorite YouTubers missed, is the fact that the judge clarified that her order, that you are gagged, all of you, does not um, pertain to the issue of the leak itself. Because I was watching one of my favorite YouTubers a few days ago, because I think he broke that, because he gets his stuff from Inner City Press, and Inner City Press is right there at the courthouse with a source. They get all the goods, and it's behind a paywall. But one of my favorite YouTubers, he gets it from them, so he had that like 2 days ago, honestly, before the page 6 and before other YouTubers. And I think he completely misconstrued what the judge said, because when I listened to him, I thought, oh, okay. But then when I did my homework and I double checked him, I realized, no, it's not okay. He got it wrong, because what he said was that the judge not only did not issue a gag order, but the judge made it impossible for the defense to move for a mistrial, because the judge said there were no leaks. I was like, oh, wow, But once I did my own research, I realized no. The judge said quite the opposite, sir. The judge did issue a gag order, but without saying it's a gag order. Because when the judge says that you all know what the law is and you're to abide by the law as it pertains to these legal proceedings, you all know what the law is. You're not in kindergarten. You're practicing attorneys. So I don't need to tell you what those laws are. And I don't need to tell you what the consequences are. And we all know the consequences could be anything up to sanctioning the prosecution themselves, for leaking or a mistrial or dismissing the case sua sponte or something. Has that ever happened, where a judge dismisses a criminal indictment sua sponte because of prosecutorial misconduct? Probably. I'm not a criminal law expert, so I don't really know. I don't know. I'm like a layperson for all practical purposes with this, even though I did go to law school 20 years ago. But so My YouTuber guy over here, who I listen to every day because he's so good, but he was wrong when he said, and I think he should correct us actually, because he told us that the judge basically said there were no leaks, and so they can't go for any mistrial, and there's no gag order, and all of that is incorrect. The judge did gag them without gagging them, right? That's a gag. When the judge tells you that you know what the law is on this and you have to follow the rules, okay, on the threat of, judicial action, this is a gag. You can no longer speak on this issue, right? Lest you be sanctioned. So that's a gag. Second, as to the mistrial issue, um, I don't know that the defense would move for a mistrial anyway. They could, based on this leak, and they probably will. But I don't know if it's the best move, just because it's likely that it would be a mistrial without prejudice, right? And what that means is that the prosecution can just turn right around and retry the case, sort of like with the Menendez brothers decades ago. The first trial ended in mistrial, and then the second trial, there was a conviction, right? And in the second trial, in the Menendez case, I believe the court did not allow testimony about the abuse that they alleged, right? Which would be the opposite here. In the second trial, in the first trial, what they're trying to do is have that video of Combs beating up his girlfriend Cassie suppressed, based on the fact that it is so inflammatory, so prejudicial. It has inflamed the public, and it prevents their client from having a fair trial, especially because what he's charged with, the main thrust, is racketeering. He has not been charged with domestic assault, right? If every man who committed domestic assault were to be tried, I mean, there probably would be very few, half the population of the world's men would be behind bars for the rest of their lives. I mean, they probably should be, don't get me wrong. You put your hands on me, I'm exercising my Second Amendment. You know what I mean? But that said, um, you know, typically someone's not going to go to jail for the rest of their lives for domestic assault unless there's like a death, or bodily injury that's tantamount to, to death or whatever, right? So what the prosecution has charged Combs here with is very different from what we saw on that tape. To me, that tape does nothing but poison and contaminate a potential jury pool. Because what you're going to have with a potential jury pool are a bunch of lay people who have not studied the law and who objectivity is the last thing on their minds. What they saw this man do in that hotel hallway was just shocking and horrific, that if the prosecution came in and said Combs had just robbed Citibank of $3.5 trillion on top of beating his girlfriend, they'd get a conviction for that too, because that's how people are. That's how people's minds work, especially people who have not had the fortune or misfortune, to take your pick really, of a legal education, is that they don't know what the law is. All they know is what they see, and they respond emotionally to what they see. And that's okay. That's human, right? They don't stop to analyze it from a legal perspective to say, well, okay, he did this, but it doesn't mean that he's guilty of that, right? So you see something like this, he's guilty of everything. That is why the release of that tape, whoever did that, in my view, did that intentionally to contaminate a potential jury pool. And yes, I do think there should be a mistrial declared. But if you're going to declare mistrial without prejudice, then I don't know if it's worth it really to get a mistrial. I almost feel like just go forward with the case with this video suppressed, rather than move for a mistrial. But I don't know. I'm not an expert on this. Don't quote me on any of this. But the idea is that for a lot of these YouTubers out there who unfortunately I think are very biased in the case, it's a little dangerous just because many people listen to them, including myself, and quite often it's not correct what they're saying. I mean, it just isn't from a legal perspective. It's a layperson's perspective, not a legal perspective. And so because they have so many people listening to them, however, this is where that contamination happens. And that's why, leaking grand jury information and leaking that tape was just so inappropriate and improper and just wrong, right? Now, as far as the leak itself, so one of my favorite YouTubers, he was like, oh, and the judge said there was no leak. And the judge never said that. The judge specifically clarified that the ruling that about the gag order does not take into account any fact finding about the leaks, and that the court will respond accordingly. So it seems to me, and do correct me if I'm wrong, because maybe I'm the one who has it wrong, but it seems that there were two separate motions, one for the gag order, one for the investigation into the leaks. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they're two separate motions. And I don't think the courts have yet responded to the motion about the leaks. And I do believe that if the court refuses to conduct an investigation, refuses to conduct a fact finding to discover and disclose and uncover the source of those leaks to the press about the leak of the video, which is part of confidential grand jury information, I think that would be a basis if we consider that there could be a conviction here based on that tape. This would be a basis for an appeal, right? This would be a basis to vacate that conviction or to reverse it, I should say, because, this tape again has prejudiced the defendant. It has inflamed the public. I mean, one of my favorite YouTubers, I have heard her say multiple times, "You are guilty," and they don't want to hear anything else. And this is not due process. This is not the way our legal system is supposed to work. I mean, I don't think, right? I think our legal system says you are innocent until you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, right? That's a very high burden of proof, a very high standard, right? And when you have people who are influential in the society, who are, discussing a piece of evidence that was leaked and telling hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that this person is guilty, this does influence other people's opinions, right? And that is why it is so inappropriate and improper what they did here in the Diddy case. I would not be surprised if the judge rules that that video should be suppressed. And I think that once you suppress that video, then I think the whole case will crumble in. Now, one of my favorite YouTubers, she said, well, it's not going to crumble in because you have the testimony of the actual victim. I personally, I don't know. Look, I'm not an expert. Don't quote me. I just don't think Cassie's testimony alone would be enough for a racketeering conviction in this case. Yes, Cassie, look, two things can be true. Two things can be true at the same time, in my opinion. It can be true that you're in a relationship where your husband, your boyfriend, your partner beats you. And it can be true that you're in a relationship where you have moments of happiness and joy with that same guy. And it can also be true, a third thing can be true, that so it can also be true, like what goes on in the privacy of your bedroom could be consensual, while at the same time, outside of the bedroom, he beats you. These two things can be true. It is not mutually exclusive that he beats her, therefore she could not have consented to their private, whatever. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, look, it's possible that she didn't. It's possible that she did not consent and that she was an innocent girl who was taken advantage of by this monster And she said no, and she said no, and she said no, and she cried for 11 years, and she said no. That's possible too. But it is possible that he could be an abuser physically and still she consented to other aspects of their relationship. And this idea that, a woman can be forced to have a child at 11 years old and to be a woman at 11, to be forced by the government to be a mother, right? But that all of a sudden at 20, she cannot make a decision whether she wants to take drugs or not. I'm not buying that. We can't have it both ways, right? If you are an adult enough to be a mother at 11, you can darn well decide at 20 years old, 22, 23, 25, even 19, that yes, I want to take drugs. No, I don't want to take drugs. Yes, I want to do this. No, I don't want to do that. You see what I'm saying? Anyway, listen, that's my position on this. See you in the next one. Take care. Bye.